am Boba Fett.
Hello my dear friends and welcome back to another video. So today we're going to be talking about big characters that we might see in the Book of Boba. I will say as a disclaimer that by no means do I believe all of these characters are going to appear, but rather these characters are just possibilities and in some cases very likely to make a cameo. The characters that I've selected fit in well with Boba's story at this point in the timeline, and in a few months time looking back, it'll be interesting to see how many came to fruition, if any at all. And as I say my dear friends, I don't expect all of these to appear, but they do make sense in light of the show's context. If you're watching this video feeling like you've seen one very similar to it, you have. Earlier in the year I made a similar video, but considering all of the new rumours and developments since the start of the year, an update was due, and so here we are. I'll also say that Boba Fett and Fennec shan't are obvious choices, so they're not on the list. So with all of that out of the way, without any more jibber jabber, let's dive straight into it. We begin with Din Djarin. He was one of the earliest rumours for the Book of Boba Fett when LRM Online stated that he, along with other characters from The Mandalorian, would make an appearance in the show. Other characters in that report included Greef Karga, Migs Mayfeld and Cobb Vanth. Considering that we were told to view the Book of Boba Fett as the next chapter in the Mandalorian story, so basically the Mandalorian Season 2.5, I wouldn't be too surprised if we do see many familiar faces. Din Djarin in particular is a likely candidate, considering we hear Pedro Pascal's voice in the first trailer. He says, "I hear that you sit on the throne of your former employer." And while some people do not think this is Din Djarin, but rather a translation of what the Ithorian crime lord is saying, I'm convinced that that voice was Din Djarin. But until the series comes out, we can only guess. Another familiar character from The Mandalorian is Cobb Vanth, and both the official trailer and the TV spot seem to confirm his possible appearance. In the most recent TV spot, we see a flashback to when Boba was still in Tusken attire. As such, there may be overlaps with The Mandalorian Season 2 in flashback sequences when Din Djarin acquired Boba's armor from Marshal Vanth himself. Another clue is in the crime syndicate that is seemingly after Boba. The men in red are no doubt members of the Red Key Raiders. We read about them first in the Aftermath trilogy, and we also get a brief glimpse at them in The Mandalorian Season 2. They posed as a mining company on Mos Pelgo, the town on Tatooine that Cobb Vanth is a marshal of. But in reality, they were the source of a lot of grief in their criminal pursuits. Cobb Vanth may seek out the help of Boba Fett, the new ruler of the underworld, and he may become an ally to Boba and Fennec. The Red Key Raiders were a burden to Cobb Vanth, and if they're also burdening Boba and Fennec shan't, then they could team up. So moving away from the Mandalorian characters, the next pick is Salacious B. Crumb, Jabba the Hutt's former Kowakian monkey lizard, whose laughter to this very day instills a sense of dread inside of me. So you might be wondering, didn't he die in the cell barge in episode 6? Well, StarWars.com recently removed his death from the databank, which retcons his death in episode 6. Much like they brought Bib Fortuna back in the Mandalorian Season 2 finale, Lucasfilm might decide to bring this guy back as a quaint little Easter egg. So next up we have what in my opinion is a very likely option, especially when you consider how the character was set up in the Clone Wars. Now I'm of course talking about Rotta the Hutt, Jabba the Hutt's son, who was his prized heir to the underworld throne. I've been wondering what became of him ever since. Given that the Book of Boba Fett is taking us back to Mos Espa, according to Jon Favreau, Rotta the Hutt, now all grown up, might have something to say about Boba taking over Jabba's palace. Maybe Rotta and other surviving Hutts had tensions with Bib Fortuna, and now that he's dead, Boba is the one who has to sort out the mess that he left behind. If you ever read the Clone Wars stories of Light and Dark, then you'll know how big of a deal Rotta was to Jabba. Jabba tells his young son a soliloquy about how one day he will inherit everything that Jabba leaves behind. It would be an amazing parallel if the Book of Boba Fett shows us Rotta trying to reclaim what he feels is his father's legacy, which now rightfully should belong to him. The Hutts are nasty business, and Boba is not going to have an easy task. Next up, my dear friends, we have Black Krrsantan. One of the crew posters for the Book of Boba shows our favourite bounty hunter up against a Wookiee, and making StarWars.net even stated in the past that a dark, tall Wookiee is going to feature in this series, one who is much less friendly than Chewie. Black Krrsantan would be a perfect addition to a Boba Fett series. The menacing Wookiee, much like Boba Fett, at one time worked for Jabba the Hutt and became a bounty hunter in his own right. And introducing Black Krrsantan to live action would also mean potentially introducing Dr. Aphra. The fan favourite archaeologist who formerly worked for Darth Vader is a character we've all wanted to see in live action for many years. Next up, my dear Mandalorians, we come on to Luke Skywalker and Grogu. It's not really clear following the Mandalorian Season 2 finale how and where their story is going to continue, but I wouldn't be surprised if Disney and Lucasfilm are trying to insert Grogu into as many shows as possible. And even early rumours, as well as a crew logo for the Book of Boba Fett, imply that we are going to see him sooner rather than later. And I think his future lies with Din rather than Luke. The big question is, why would Luke and Grogu be in this series in the first place? Simply put, and this is just my theory, maybe some trouble arises that affects the galaxy at large, and such an incident causes our heroes to unite. We've spoken in the past about how all of these shows, or rather all the Mandoverse shows, could be a retelling of the original Thrawn trilogy, and the Book of Boba is no exception. Maybe the Grisk, or another threat from the unknown regions, causes Luke and Boba's paths to cross. Moving on, next up we have Qi'ra and Crimson Dawn. The War of the Bounty Hunters comic series made a massive deal about Crimson Dawn following Maul's death. Between The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, when Boba was on his way from Bespin to deliver Han and Carbonite to Jabba's palace, Qi'ra, the now leader of Crimson Dawn, stole her former lover Han and got in the way of Boba's journey. Now that Boba sits on the throne of the murky underbelly of the galaxy, he is in the terrain of some major syndicates, including Crimson Dawn and Black Sun. Next up, my dear friends, we have Muchi, the young Rancor introduced in the Bad Batch Season 1. This Rancor, who was formerly owned by Jabba the Hutt, would be all grown up by the time of the Book of Boba. And given Star Wars News Net's recent leak that some of the concept art for Book of Boba includes Boba Fett himself riding a Rancor, Muchi might be the one. All grown up and in live action, Muchi will resemble a certain Patissa, the Rancor that Luke destroyed in Return of the Jedi. And speaking of the Bad Batch, Sid was made out to be a very important character in Season 1. I made an entire video explaining just why she's so important as we go into the second season of the Bad Batch, but she might also feature in the Book of Boba Fett. Trandoshans are clearly going to be a part of the series, and she is well connected with bounty hunters and the galaxy's underworld. Next up, my dear friends, we have to address some more obvious cameos, surviving classic bounty hunters. This was from another LRM Online scoop earlier in the year, where they stated that all of the classic lineup from The Empire Strikes Back is going to be present. And yes, my friends, that also includes IG-88, who was rebuilt. So we might see Bossk, Dengar, Zuckuss, Forlom and IG-88 next month when the show drops. And speaking of fan favourite bounty hunters, who can forget Cad Bane, another very probable candidate. I don't know if you've realised this, but he's the one bounty hunter who's met all three Fetts. He was well acquainted with Boba's father Jango, and as we saw in the Bad Batch, he met Omega as well. Let's also not forget the standoff with Fennec Shand, and she might come face to face with him after all these years. And as you guys know, there's a deleted scene from the Clone Wars which was going to depict how Boba got the dent in his helmet in a fight with Cad Bane. Maybe we'll see a live action rendering of this in a flashback sequence. Next up, my dear friends, we have Omega, an unaltered yet genetically enhanced Jango clone. Just like Boba Fett, she was a pure genetic replication of Fett, making her Boba's sister. I've explained in the past why I don't think she's going to appear in the Book of Boba, at least in Season 1. Now there are two characters which I think should appear in the Book of Boba, and those are the obvious Mace Windu and Han Solo, but the reason I'm not really going to address them in this video is I've made entire videos dedicated to those topics, especially for Mace Windu. For your sake guys, I'm not going to repeat myself, so go check out those videos if you are interested. But that, my dear friends, is my list. There are many other characters which in theory we could include, but I want to leave that to you guys. Which characters did I not mention that you want to see in the Book of Boba Fett? As always, my dear friends, if you enjoyed this one, please be sure to give me a big fat thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you're brand new and a massive welcome if you are, and also if you're not a patron, then why not consider becoming one? The link is down there in the description, but otherwise, may the force be with you always. I'm Star Wars Meg, and I'll see you tomorrow.